help me in welcoming the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade of Barbados, Kerrie Symmonds. You may have your seats. Honorable Kerrie Symmonds, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade of Barbados, Honorable Paula Ingabire, Minister of ICT Rwanda, Professor Allen Robinson, Director CMU-Africa, distinguished delegates from Barbados, students, all protocol observed, good morning. We are pleased today to host and welcome you here at CMU-Africa. We have prepared a short program for you, Honorable Minister, and we will begin with a speech, an introduction from the Honorable Minister of ICT. This will then be followed by a presentation of our program by the Director of CMU-Africa, and then we will hear from you, Honorable Minister, and have an interactive session thereafter, after which we shall conclude with a tour of our campus. My name is Geoffrey Kimani, a second-year Master of Science in Engineering Artificial Intelligence student here at Carnegie Mellon University, Africa, and I come from Kenya. I'm pleased today to be your moderator. So without further ado, kindly give me this opportunity to welcome the Minister of ICT Rwanda, Paula Ingabire, to take on from here.
Honorable Minister Kerrie, the entire delegation from Barbados, a warm welcome to Rwanda once again, and a warm welcome to Carnegie Mellon Africa campus, where their heart is in the work. And you'll see it as you get to tour and hear more about the work that we're doing with Carnegie Mellon University. And I want to make my remarks very brief, and we have some slides that can be put up very quickly for those of you who will need more information. But where we are at today, Carnegie Mellon is part of what we call the Kigali Innovation City, which is really an anchor project or an anchor program on how we build innovation capabilities and how we build the innovation ecosystem in Rwanda. And so this, I know we had enough time, Honorable Minister and your delegation, to discuss yesterday what Rwanda's digital transformation journey has been like over the last 22 years. And today, our conversation will be focused on what have been the building blocks for a vibrant and robust innovation ecosystem. So on the next slide, what you see are some of those building blocks. And Rwanda, just like many other countries, is setting up itself to be a technology hub. And it's a good thing. I think when you look across Africa, we have not less than 15 countries that have that aspiration to be a technology hub. And we like to say it's a good thing because we need all those innovation hotspots across the continent that are working together and nurturing innovations and nurturing market-creating innovations. But what is very distinct about our vision to become a technology and innovation hub is how we've set up ourselves to be a proof of concept hub, where all these new innovations can be tested, launched, and scaled. Because the kind of problems that we're dealing with here in Rwanda are not unique to Rwanda. They may be different in scale and size for different economies, but they're similar across the board. Whether it's leveraging digital technologies to address quality healthcare, whether it's using digital technologies to address quality education or food security, I think those challenges are similar across the board. What you have up on the slide is a number of programs or initiatives that we have been able to launch as proofs of concept One of them being Volkswagen, where we've had an investment of about $55.5 million to really establish the first car assembly plant here in Rwanda. But that's just not enough, because we're also focused on electronic e-mobility. And that's key as we think about the trends when it comes to mobility, but also how digital technologies can support that effort. The second one on the slide is Zipline, which is really how we've leveraged the drone technology to deliver healthcare products to the 500 plus health facilities across the country. Zipline started in Rwanda with those 500 plus health facilities, and today they serve over 10,000 health facilities in over 4 markets. And that proof of concept is what has birthed what we call performance-based regulations that today have been replicated across different countries. When Zipline started, we didn't have such regulations globally that would really govern the multiple use cases around drones. Irembo, which you heard about yesterday, which is really a GovTech platform where we digitize all our public services, has been that one proof of concept that is starting to attract interest, but also many governments that are willing to replicate as we think about a single platform where citizens can get services under a simple principle of zero trip, zero paper for our citizens. And we'll be sharing all these slides, but these are some of those examples. What is very interesting about our proof of concept strategy is the fact that even when we provide an environment to nurture these proof of concept ideas, it gives birth to a new industry. When Zipline came, we did not have a drone industry in Rwanda, but today, when you look at the multiple drone companies, including Kerrie that you see on the slide, that is using aerial imagery to respond to different use cases, including mapping those mosquito breeding grounds, which then supports our malaria prevention efforts, but also using that for spraying these mosquito breeding grounds. And so there's just so many opportunities, and I think what we take pride in as a country is how do we get to test and launch many of these innovations that are happening in our market. But it's important that they also provide the scale that is required. But beyond that, I wanted to highlight the 4 things that you see on the slide, which is really the competitions around startups. How do we identify those ideas? How do we support them with business development programs, product design? How do we support them with innovative financing that will allow them to test and scale their product and service offerings? How do we put in place very proactive policies and regulations that will allow them to test some of these? And Honorable Minister will agree with me that in many economies, startups and MSMEs are the backbone of any economy. And so for us as a country, we've prioritized those kind of policies that give a level playing field for startups as well as big companies across the board. The second slide, the following slide, which perhaps will be my last one, is why is KIC so important to this vision of Rwanda becoming a Pan-African hub for technology and innovation? And why CMU? So today we're at CMU, but when we start the tour, you realize that we have multiple other academic institutions, including the University of Rwanda Biotechnology campus. You also have the Africa Institute for Mathematical Sciences. You have ALU. And that is very important for us because innovation will never be spurred if you don't have the critical pool of talent that is going to really spur all these innovations. And so for us, this was the very first building block in terms of building that talent, that critical mass that is going to fuel the tech and innovation hub. And so that's why that has been a very focused strategy on attracting all these world-class education institutions to come and partner with us in building that critical pool of talent. The second one, which I've already talked about extensively, and I won't dwell much on that, is being a proof of concept hub, putting in place the necessary environment for many of the entrepreneurs and many of the students that you're going to see here. When they leave CMU, they're not necessarily looking for jobs, but they're already creating startups and businesses that offer employment to their fellow youth, but at the same time that are really creating impact across the board. And the last one is really that supportive and accessible infrastructure. It's not by accident that the Kigali Innovation City is anchored around the special economic zone. As we think about advanced manufacturing, how technology supports that, it's important that those synergies between the industry and the tech ecosystem are there so that we can create those perfect partnerships for deployment. So Minister, I'll not take much longer. I just really wanted to give that overview of what our ambitions of becoming a technology and innovation hub are about, and the central role that Carnegie Mellon, as many other campuses around here, are playing in nurturing that ecosystem and allowing us to be a proof of concept hub. I thank you very much.
Honorable Minister Kerrie Symmonds, Honorable Minister Paula Ingabile, distinguished delegates from Barbados, students, all protocols observed. Welcome, and we're so glad to host you here today on our campus at CMU-Africa. I'm just going to speak for a few minutes about our program here and our unique partnership, strategic partnership with the government of Rwanda. See if I got my slides up. There we go. So, Honorable Minister, CMU-Africa was established as part of a strategic partnership with the government of Rwanda in 2011. And so we've been here for 11 years, and we're part of the government's strategy to build an ICT-focused workforce. And they reached out to Carnegie Mellon to initiate the conversations given our sort of world-class programs in computer science, information and computer technology, robotics. Of course, Carnegie Mellon is a leading private research university that's based in the United States, and this is one of our global campuses, and our only global campus in Africa. So our mission, really, it's fourfold. One is to educate students from all African countries, to be a hub to draw talent to Rwanda. We conduct research to solve African and global challenges. As Minister Paula was saying, we have an entrepreneurship focus where we want to catalyze innovation and entrepreneurship, and then we want to be a resource for African governments. So we have 3 programs here. It's a postgraduate program. They're all Masters of Science. They're the same programs that we offer in the Pittsburgh campus. So there's only one set of degrees you get from Carnegie Mellon. Master of Science in Information Technology, Master of Science in Electrical and Computer Engineering, and Master of Science in Engineering and Artificial Intelligence. That's our newest program, and that's what Jeffrey is in. Within those programs, we have a variety of different concentration areas, as you can see, cybersecurity to software engineering to energy systems. So we enroll on this campus 290 students from 20 different countries from across the continent. And so really this draws students from across and helps build the ecosystem. In terms of the outcomes of our students, more students stay than come from Rwanda. So say 50% of the students are from Rwanda, 60% of our students have first destination employment here in Rwanda. So we're bringing talent to the country. The outcomes of our students, about 15% go on to do PhDs, often in Europe and the United States. 15 to 20% go on to entrepreneurship, to startups, either their own or working for another startup. The remainder of the students go work at companies that you would recognize, multinationals, but they do so on the continent. The vast majority of our students stay on the continent. So they work for a brand name, they work for Rwandan firms like Bank of Kigali, they work for the government, all sorts of different sectors. And so really, I think that's our key to our success. Esther here works with Minister Paula, and she's an example of one of our super successful alums. Research and innovation is critically important to us. ICT is the center of what we do, but of course that's an enabling technology that we apply to lots of different problems. So there's lots of research that happens on campus that applies it to problems like healthcare, inclusive finance, agriculture, environment is what I work on. And so there's a lot of active research on campus, often in partnership with other universities on the continent and government agencies in Rwanda. We work, say, for example, a lot with the Rwandan Space Agency. One highlight I wanted to just say is our initiative called Scilab Africa, which is focused on cybersecurity on the continent. This is obviously critically important when we're thinking about the digital transformation, because if people don't feel like their transactions are secure, that could create a real challenge. One of our big focuses is in fintech, and of course there are many components from digital identity to digital payment to how humans, you and I, interact with our technology and capacity building. This work is sponsored by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Entrepreneurship was mentioned. We run an incubator on campus. We have a track in one of our degree programs for entrepreneurship, and as I said, 15 to 20% of our alumni are working at startups. The picture there is one of our alumni who came in second at the Hanga Pitch Fest last year, which is a big pitch fest that the government runs. More than 400 companies competed, and his student team has a company that's focused on improving reliability of the energy system through reusing electric vehicle batteries. It's a really exciting technology they're working on. The final thing I wanted to emphasize is that we have a Pan-African focus to make Rwanda a hub of a lot of this activity, and we just actually launched an Afritech network. We just had our launch meeting earlier this week, and it's a Pan-African network of leading technical universities, and really our goal is to drive inclusive digital transformation. And so that's another activity that we're doing. And so I'd be happy if anybody from you or your delegation have any questions. I'd be happy to answer any questions, or we can move on to the next phase of the program. Any questions? Great. Okay, well now we really are to the show. And Honorable Minister, I'm sure I speak for everybody here when I say, this is the moment we've been waiting for. So ladies and gentlemen, it's my distinct pleasure to invite Honorable Minister Kerrie Symmonds, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade of Barbados, to the podium for his remarks. Following your remarks, there'll be a short program and a discussion with some students and some local entrepreneurs. Honorable Minister, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. And let me just acknowledge the Cabinet of Rwanda, the Director General present, Permanent Secretary, obviously yourself, Professor, and ladies and gentlemen all. I want to say to you that I'm blown away. This is exceptionally good stuff. I had absolutely no idea, Minister, when we spoke yesterday, about the extent of what I was going to be able to see. And I want to say that it is this type of development that Barbados is very anxious about partnering in and being able to perhaps be the bridge to the CARICOM Caribbean community. We, as I looked at your slide, Minister, my memory went back to March of this year. At that time, I was Minister of Energy in Barbados. And I had spent the first, perhaps, 3 months of the year working with the Prime Minister on trying to make sure that our energy sector would have been positioned in terms of the incentives that we offer to potential investors at the forefront of people's minds in the sense of giving excellent opportunity. And she went to Parliament in March of this year at the end of our financial year, and she would have presented a budget to the country. And at that time, she would have made a commitment which has not been mirrored anywhere in the Caribbean yet, and that is that for a period of 2 years, there would be a special incentive for the importation of electric vehicles. And the tax structure was adjusted so as to make it exceptionally inexpensive. In fact, effectively, you paid only for the vehicle, hardly any duty attached to it. And as historic an achievement as that was legislatively, the fact of the matter is it has meant nothing to us because you can't get the vehicles. So that people in Barbados are on a waiting list today, being told that you will probably get a vehicle in July next year. And that is the kind of challenge that we're faced with. So when I see what is being done here in terms of the assembly plant and so on, I understand the importance of it. And it brings me to another point that we have had to reflect on, Permanent Secretary, in recent days. While we were at COP27, we put an initiative before the world, the Bridgetown Initiative. And one of the things that we are basically saying is that as part of this whole process, this whole discussion, let's make it simple, about climate justice and so on, that we have to recognize that there must now be the reality, that you go beyond what the Prime Minister calls just the rhetoric of climate change and making the thing happen. And to make it happen, it means that we have to be able to have access to those things that we do not have. I talked to you about the vehicles just now. Equally important is the question of battery storage. You can't really store, you can't generate electricity through photovoltaics and just throw it onto the grid sensibly. You have to be able to store it and therefore dispatch it when required. But the fact of the matter is that, again, our utility is told that they can't source the batteries that are necessary to fuel our grid and will not be able to source them probably until December of 2024. So that it makes a mockery of all the things that we're trying to do unless we're able to come to the South and find the ways of doing the things that you folks here have been obviously doing so exceptionally well, which is building out your own capacity, investing in innovation, bringing an end to the challenge that we have long had to endure about having to look inwardly look outwardly for innovation opportunity as opposed to looking inwardly. And that is the kind of journey that Barbados now wants to go on. It is for that reason that we are very keen on the partnership here with Rwanda. And equally, it is for that reason that we're keen on being the bridge into the Caribbean, because, trust me, each and every member of the Caribbean community is faced with the same challenge. And the countries of the South, by extension, are all at the starting gate, trying to go on this transformative journey, being told by the industrialized powers of the world that we have to get there by 2030 or 40 or whenever. But it is almost as though they have their hands on our fate, and they determine our destiny. And this is really an opportunity for us to free ourselves from that type of shackle. It is also an important thing because of the fact that this is perhaps just the tip of the iceberg. I noticed, Minister, that you did not mention the pharmaceutical developments that you have, and perhaps that is one of the most famous parts of the Rwandan journey. And again, part of that which we did at the COP was to announce a communique in which Guyana and Barbados will partner with Rwanda in the exercise of pharmaceutical manufacturing and bringing some pharmaceutical equity to the process. Now, Professor, I do not know if you are aware, but when we endured the COVID experience in the Caribbean, we tried very hard, and Permanent Secretary in the Prime Minister's office is here. She would have been, she's actually been given a national award. She's now the most honorable, which is the highest award that the country can offer. But she would have been at the forefront of trying to get vaccines into Barbados. And essentially we were told that, you have to wait because those countries that were manufacturing in large measure looked after their own as opposed to the exporting. And the difficulty that you face then is I think Secretary General Tedros calls it a vaccine apartheid. You find that you are unable to look after the most critical interests of your people because you're just placed on a waiting list that has an indefinite point of ending. Now, that obviously can't work, and that is the reason why we're so very keen on doing the pharmaceutical type of project. And again, by extension, some of the good work that you guys have been doing here in Rwanda is clearly about the research into DNA and mRNA. And I'm actually blown away by that as well, because quite frankly, if I could be very candid with all of you, we are people of African extraction in the Caribbean, and it means a lot to us. Jamaica has produced arguably some of the finest athletes in the world. Kenya equally has produced some of the finest distance runners in the world. And the questions that have to be asked really are, about the anaerobic efficiencies of the DNA line. The questions that sometimes have to be asked are also difficult questions regarding health and the apparent predisposition of some people, especially females in our race, to certain types of cancers. These are critical social and developmental challenges that we have to have discussions about, that we have to be able to buttress with serious research and analysis. And it is the type of work that is being done here in Rwanda that therefore creates a measure of interest for us, because it allows us to get really where we want to be, masters of our own destiny, being able to do the kind of research that helps us to build our communities, protect our people medically, and improve, quite frankly, the quality of our athletic endeavors in the field of sports. And that is obviously something that all of us want to see continue to happen. As a young athlete myself, at one time, when I was trying, I'm neither young nor athletic anymore. But when I was doing some middle distance running, you know, the question of the combustion of lactic acid, and your coaches would tell you about this kind of thing. And when you run 400 meters, you realize how fast you can burn. You can burn. But the truth is that there are clearly differences along genetic lines with the capacity of certain types of athletes. And that type of thing intrigued me as a youngster. My forte was never the sciences, but we produce 6,000 science graduates in the Caribbean every 5 years at the University of the West Indies. And it is the dream of the Prime Minister of Barbados to be able to take those folks. And as she says, you know, teaching is obviously a very honorable profession, but we want them to do more than just teach. We want them to be able to now be part of solutions, and very practical solutions which are geared towards helping us to climb the tiers and the rungs of the ladder towards making our healthcare system a lot better, making our economies a lot stronger, our societies, by extension, more fortified. And so, again, Minister, I am blown away. This is the kind of thing that we are anxious to partner with you in, and I want to offer all of you our congratulations and our commitment to being the best possible students and partners. Now, on the question of being students, let me just say to you, Professor, the minister responsible for information science technology in Barbados would have come to Rwanda in June of this year, if I recall correctly. And he would have, at that time, expressed an interest on the part of the government in having some of our students come up here to participate in this type of experience. Because as good as our university is, we haven't gotten to this type of stage yet. And effectively, what we would love to be able to do, I noted you said this is the only campus in Africa, and I'm not sure if you have any in the Caribbean, but I would want to start now to court you in that direction and to bend your mind there, because again, this is a developmental journey. And I've said it 100 times before on this trip, I'm going to say it again. Barbados is very keen on being that bridge into the region. And the region itself is very keen on coming to terms with this type of work and being at the centerpiece of this type of work, because, again, we have been on the import end of a lot of things that we now wish to be able to better manage for ourselves on our own developmental journey. So thank you very much, and I look forward to the rest of our experience here together.
Thank you. Thank you very much once again, Honorable Minister. At this moment, I'd like to invite you on stage for our interactive session with the students. So as he comes on stage to take his seat, Honorable Minister, here at Carnegie, we go with the words of Andrew Carnegie, "My heart is in the work." But I can assure you today, the students gathered here have their hearts and minds here for this great moment. And they can't wait to interact with you. So let's get to it, right? So gathered here today, we have students from CMU, we have students from the African Leadership University, and we have students from the University of Rwanda and entrepreneurs. And to begin us off, we have seen Barbados being a leader in ICT strategies. We have seen ICT strategic plans from Barbados. We have seen work from home guidelines during the pandemic period. We have seen even the government take initiative as a model user for ICT technologies. What has been the impact of this to innovation and entrepreneurship in Barbados?
It has been transformational. It very often, I would have to say to you, it proves that adversity is often the mother of invention and creativity. I would have been Minister of Tourism at the time when the COVID pandemic shut down or forced us to close for commercial purposes our airport and seaport. The tourism product in Barbados at that time constituted, if you take it both directly and indirectly, 45% of the country's GDP. I need not tell you, Professor, that is a substantial amount of the income of the country wrapped up in one endeavor. And it came crashing to a halt. You could run racehorses through the airport because there's just nothing happening there. So you have to find then a creative way of getting people to come to the island. And just to use that as an example, we started the Barbados Welcome Stamp, and that welcome stamp would see Barbados reaching into the North American community, the European community, going to people who are themselves shut down, but shut down in very inhospitable circumstances in terms of the weather, and saying to them, look, come and use our public infrastructure. Internet, et cetera, is all world class. You can do your meetings, et cetera, via the platforms of Zoom or wherever else you wish to do. But you can, as I said to some folks yesterday, you can be having those meetings while sitting by a poolside drinking rum punch or on the beach, so that, you know, it is an inviting way of getting people to come and spend some time and some money on the island for a year, as opposed to come in for a week or 2 weeks of vacation. And it helped us to not plug a hole fully, but to restabilize what would have been a critical economic challenge that we have. With respect to the other side of the question that you asked, it is transformative because of what we're being able to achieve in public administration. When I became cabinet minister in 2018, we would, and PS would confirm this, every Wednesday evening they would send around the cabinet papers. And the cabinet papers, depending on the size of the agenda the next day, would be a file about this thick, and you lug it to cabinet. And the truth of the matter is that that process has now all gone online, so that our entire cabinet exercise is on an iPad, and you just load papers and treat to them during the cabinet meeting. By extension, and I was saying this to the minister yesterday, it is a process that we're on now where we want to be able to treat our legal system in that way and do most of the non-contentious court hearings in that virtual space. Equally, it helps us to manage the land registry of the country because of the fact that you can therefore have easy access to issues relating to who owns title and where, and all of that is found and easily accessible by everyone. We've brought our corporate registry onto line so that filings of documents and registration of companies and the management of that process is online. The offering of all of government services, et cetera, we are trying to get online. But even as we are trying to achieve these things and recognizing the importance of it, the truth of the matter is we still are very inclined to be students of places like Rwanda, where you all have gone. I mean, your transformative experience has been light years, leaps and bounds ahead of ours. And so I discovered yesterday, for example, that your public procurement process can be dealt with virtually from beginning to end in that virtual space. So it makes your economics a lot more efficient and a lot more speedy, and I think a lot more transparent as well. And that is really where we are going, and that has been the type of journey that we've been on.
Yeah, that's really brilliant to make Barbados an efficiently networked island. So at this moment, with your permission, I will take questions from members
Sure.
of the audience.
Please do.
So members of the audience, when you get the opportunity to ask your question, keep it to one question, make it clear and precise, right? So we can have the first questions. Anyone? Okay, Akupene.
Good morning.
My name is Athene Diatahoga. I am a Master's of Science in Information Technology student from Ghana, concentrating in IT entrepreneurship. My question is, how does the Bajan government balance global trends and priorities with internal efforts?
How do we balance global trends with internal efforts? I think that the Prime Minister would say that we try to stay ahead of the, of the global trends and try to set them. But no, in all honesty, our internal efforts are, I suppose, based on trying to keep abreast with the best practices. Now, obviously, there are a number of global trends. What we're trying to do in terms of our governance structure is to identify best practices from around the world. And again, I don't want to belabor the point, but it didn't take long to work out that Rwanda was a place that was offering some best practices. And where we identify the best practices, that is where we try to build a cooperative relationship, and in the hope that the benefit that will come from that is to be able to carry the country a few steps further. And by extension, the Caribbean region. I keep on bringing the Caribbean region into the perspective because we are part of a common market community, a Caribbean single market and economy exercise, in which Barbados has the responsibility of being the lead country with respect to integrative efforts. And a lot of the best practices, therefore, if we can harness them and reproduce them, then we are able then to translate them into something that is a reoccurring decimal across the region. And that, therefore, helps to lift it's like a tide lifting all the ships across the region in the Caribbean.
Brilliant. So we'll take our second question from that side. Thank you.
Good morning, Honorable Minister and everyone. My name is Leandre Bergua. I'm a CMU-Africa alum, and I'm co-founder at SLS Energy, a battery recycling and repurposing company. We provide energy storage as a service using batteries retired from electric vehicles and salvaged from other renewable energy applications. So your comments about climate change and electric mobility and energy systems related so well with me. And I have a question about circular economy. Island nations such as Barbados are particularly impacted by global warming, and I'm curious.
You may need to speak up a little bit more. I'm not hearing everything you're saying.
Oh yeah, okay. I was saying that island nations such as Barbados are particularly impacted by global warming, and circular economy could be important in offsetting greenhouse gas emissions that go into industrial and other technological products. So I'm curious what's your views and initiatives around establishing a circular economy, and if you invite or encourage external companies that are already working on similar solutions to participate.
The circular economy is at the core of our internal effort in terms of both the environmental policy and also the national energy policy. And we are trying to build out an economy which will be entirely fossil fuel free by the year 2030. And even as we do that, we also recognize that we are a small island with very limited natural resources. So it is critical, therefore, to utilize those resources that we do have in a way that allows us to reuse, recycle, etc. Now, I'm going to be very honest with you. It isn't all hunky-dory and perfect. We are making significant strides with renewables, but recycling is still a bit of a problem in Barbados. And frankly, we've identified in Canada a best practice, again, which will, if we can effectively get the legislation in place soon, I don't want to throw any of my colleagues under the bus, but that is a critical thing that we have to do in Barbados. We need to have recycling legislation. which compels now the country as a whole to take this process a lot more seriously. We have tried to do this by way of, the normative approach, that it would be ideal if you recycle. It would be an ideal thing that you should aspire to, and you urge every household to do it. But there are few who do, and there are many who do not. And clearly, as we go forward, we have to strengthen that. Where we have had successes has been in taking, for example, plastics out of our system, so that we banned single-use plastics in Barbados about, how long ago, PS? 4 years ago, the ban on single-use plastics. And again, it is a cultural shift. The reality is that the hardest part of this journey very often is that too many people in the community do not get the importance of either climate change, environmental security and safety. Those are issues which are not on the forefront of people's minds. Very often they come at a bit of a cost, and certainly a lot of inconvenience, because you become acculturated to the practice of doing things one way all of your life. But you begin, and as we have done on this journey, I think that is a conversation had in every school. But while children go to school and come home, as mine did, and put pressure on the parents to make sure that you're supposed to recycle stuff, the reality is we have to go further, and we have to do it a lot faster. The single-use plastics, in case you're interested, that has been, I think, an overwhelming success. We began with a tremendous amount of pushback from the wider community, but as it went on, people bought into it and they came to understand the importance of it. And for a coastal community like Barbados, it is very important because of the fact that once those plastics get into the ocean, then there is destruction of the very food that feeds us, because the fish that consume it are dying prematurely, and so on, and then the destruction of the coral reef as well. So there are a number of reasons why we are on that particular course of action.
Thank you very much. So we are going to take more questions from that other side.
Thank you. My name is Baingana Innocent. I'm a student in mechanical engineering at the University of Rwanda College of Science and Technology. And my question goes like this. Barbados introduced a new national ID. What benefits will it bring to the citizens in the new cyber revolution? And what can Rwanda learn as we are also working on a digital ID? Thank you.
We've introduced a new digital ID. And again, I have to be honest with you, because it is a very interesting thing. I reflected on this yesterday, but never commented to you, Minister, about it. Our digital ID is intended to be fully, what is the term I'm looking for? It should be able to go operate, I don't want to say electronically, online. It should be able to be compatible with the police should be able, if they stop you for arresting you purposes, to know immediately everything about you. Your driver's license should be there, so it's compatible with the immigration department's records and police and all of the other authorities. We have chosen to do this in the most, what is the best word? We are trying to be as flexible with our public as possible. I just said that sometimes you get a lot of pushback with things. So immediately as you move from what was a very basic ID card that just had your name and your date of birth, and I don't even think it had your address, and you're now going to have this new card with all of the embedded technology. There's a question of what Big Brother is doing. Why does the government want all this information about me? What purposes will it be used for? Is this going to be used to corrupt the political process and the democratic election process in Barbados? And it goes on and on and on. And either you get yourself bogged down in a war with the people who you want to help, which takes you nowhere, or you have to be able, as we've done, to say, look, this is going to be a hybrid approach. There are those who immediately get the benefit of being able to say, on this ID card, eventually I can be treated as though this is a passport. I can arrive in the United States of America and they know everything they need to know about me, and so therefore not a problem. I can renew my driver's license and so on immediately on the basis of this. It makes my life a lot easier when I do it this way electronically. But for older people sometimes, or more conservative thinkers sometimes, that is not easily sold. And we've therefore done a hybrid approach. There are some people who are getting the card, and it will be very basic. It's the same card, but it is just not going to be keyed in to that public infrastructure system. Equally, there'll be people like me. I got my card a few weeks ago, and mine now is keyed into the public infrastructure system. And we are hoping that as time goes by, more and more people will realize the benefits on their own of being part of that public infrastructure system, and then just make the transition. So we've chosen the path of least resistance. I cannot tell you now whether that perhaps is the very best way to have done it, but certainly that is the model we've chosen, because our Prime Minister, bless her heart, does not like to engage in a confrontational way with the people who've elected her. And it is, I think, a decision that has to be made by every leader as to how you're going to go about doing this thing. But for some people, the real challenge has been the potential invasion of privacy and the need to make sure that the appropriate cybersecurity levels that government must have in place are there. I think that that is the most legitimate of the criticisms or considerations in the matter. And I had indicated to your minister here only yesterday that that is part of what I think Barbados has to really reflect on in terms of identifying the best practices for cybersecurity, because we move now everything into this virtual space. And perhaps the actual real collaboration among countries of the South must be, how can we partner to police and to make sure that we create this barrier of protection around ourselves, so that those people who are very expert at hacking and disrupting and so on do not cause havoc in societies that have become completely dependent on that virtual space and within which to do everything from healthcare, business, democratic governance, you name it. And that is really what the challenge for the future is.
That's really good. We are going to take our final question because of time. So we'll have one more question from University of Rwanda, I think.
Hello, good morning. Not University of Rwanda, sorry. My name is Kennedy Odhiambo, an entrepreneur and project manager at Solve IT Africa. Ideally, my question now relates to the greater environment or the greater working space or between nationalities or between countries. Currently, the greatest trend, and I believe you mentioned Barbados intends to be a pace setter or a trend setter when it comes to the tech industry. The most upcoming revolution is the global business sector, whereby countries are sharing talent, countries are sharing individuals from various spaces. So how does Barbados, or rather which structure has Barbados put across to ensure that talent from places like Rwanda, because Rwanda ideally is made up of majority of the people are youth, and so many of them are passionate about the tech sector. So how can this talent in Rwanda be part of the greater good in developing some of these technologies used in climate change, used in revolutionizing batteries and so forth in the greater good of the society through the global business sector? Thank you.
Well, I think that you're touching on a very important thing. One of the messages that I came here with was that Barbados is very anxious to be that bridge physically between the Organization of African States and the Caribbean. And the thinking at the level of the head of government is that if it were possible, we would want to become, the Caribbean that is, would want to become the sixth member of the African community. Now, it is therefore necessary for us to talk like brothers and sisters to each other and to recognize our strengths and weaknesses. One of the strengths of the Caribbean has been the ability to begin an integration movement. There are those who disliked the integration effort intensely. There always will be those countries which are seen as poles of economic attraction. Automatically, you will think in terms of one country or another for commercial purposes. Within the Caribbean, that is true. Within Europe, that was also true. But what we've come to recognize is that every country is able to lend in some special way its own strengths and has a certain uniqueness in terms of the contribution. It also means that the movement of our people and the cross-fertilization of ideas and experiences is very important. And in the Caribbean community, that is also something that we've come now to appreciate. There was a time, especially when I was growing up as a little boy, that the last place you might think of going for a vacation was the island right next door to you. Gone forever are those days. And I mean, you know, it is now an option of first choice. If you have a public holiday and you have a long weekend, you nip next door to St. Lucia or wherever else. So that I think the movement of our people is going to be a critical part of this process, and the opening of doors of opportunity for economic participation. And that may be just employment. It may also be the setting up of businesses, that right of establishment of businesses in the region. And I think that is part of the discussion that we must now have among ourselves. It is never going to be a painless one. In the Caribbean itself, it has not been a painless one. We are neighbors with each other. Rights of establishment was something that was met with, again, the resistance of some parts of the community, because we've been taught through a colonial experience to view each other with a lot of suspicion. But when you drill down and you look at, for example, what your minister was able to show me today, she's showing me a development trajectory in Rwanda, which is identical to the development trajectory that we want to be on and we have envisaged for ourselves in Barbados. The challenges that confront her in Rwanda are identical to the challenges that confront us in Barbados. The solutions here, for example, at Carnegie Mellon, is a solution that we want for ourselves in Barbados. Our journeys are not that different, and therefore it is really a question of confronting that reality and throwing open the doors of opportunity. Perhaps that is more easily said than done, but I'm sure that even here in the African community across the continent, you'll realize that there's a lot of truth in what I'm saying to you. But it can only work if we continue to claim ground. My Prime Minister always says this: let us claim what ground we can, and we come back to fight another day. But step by step, we will do it. So that I can say to you, we have waived all visa requirements for Rwandans coming to Barbados, and that has been reciprocated by Rwanda for Barbadians.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. I think we can take one final question.
Fine.
So we can have question.
Good morning. My name is Ali Nobomutijima. I'm a Rwandan citizen and a first-year student at the African Leadership University doing policy and advocacy. So I'm curious to hear from you. So with the current state of global economic disparity that intimately threatens countries from the global south, specifically our climate disaster preparedness, the effectiveness of our health and education systems, what do you think small countries like mine and yours can do to better navigate through these ambiguous situations? Thank you.
I think in 2 words: partner and advocate. I almost said fight, but I don't want that to be misinterpreted. But we have to advocate. I mentioned just now a concept which we have put out called the Bridgetown Initiative. That initiative was the brainchild of a few thinkers on this matter in Barbados around climate change. And we recognize that there are some inequities and some inequalities in the whole thing. I pointed you to some. The access to the technology is a major challenge for us. Financing, because the journey from where we are to get to where we want to be costs the countries of the South a lot of money. And then the other thing is the justice of it, because our economies are really in a state where we are focusing on development. But we're being asked now to divert resources away from that development trajectory to fuel a climate protection issue, which is very important, but it is not of our own making. We did not create the holes in the ozone layer by the oil and gas production and manufacturing technologies. In fact, they came to Africa as they came to the Caribbean, extracted as much wealth as they could, returned it to the metropole, and created what is called first world industrialized status for themselves, and therefore polluted the entire planet. We now pay a price for that too. Now you can sit on the outside of it and rail against it forever, or you can have serious discussions about the solutions. And we feel that a part of the solution has to be that you can urge the polluters, the principal polluters, to pay their fair share. And what we have put forward is a proposal which would see, for example, some of the oil and gas companies being invited to come and sit at the table and let us discuss what they can contribute to this question now of financing climate change adjustments for all of us in the South. Having discussions about the way in which we manage our debt situation. Many of us in the South are very indebted countries. We in Barbados have managed to get, climate bonds built into our debt repayment systems, so that if, for example, we had a hurricane in Barbados, the bond arrangement would be that you, for a period of 2 years, we for a period of 2 years, would no longer have to be repaying that debt, but we can direct the money that we otherwise would have to be committing to paying back the loaner. We direct that money to the refinancing and reconstruction process in the country as a result of a hurricane. Now, I don't know that you all are very familiar with hurricanes in this part of the world, but let me just say to you, in the space of 5-10 hours, that wind force of probably 200 miles an hour, in some cases 150 miles an hour, sitting on top of your island can decimate all of the housing stock, decimate all of the businesses, set back the entire economy by a space of 10 years. So that you have a single climatic experience that lasts for less than a day, and then your economy is pushed backwards by 10 years, a whole decade. And that has been the experience of several countries in the Caribbean. And so what we are saying is that give us the breathing space, the elbow room, that we can then, instead of being committed to refinancing debt at the same time as we rebuild, that we just treat to the rebuilding process for a period of 2 years, and then we come back to the debt. The debt is just changed in terms of its schedule. You pay for another 2 years because you had a 2-year hiatus, and there is no change in the interest rate. The lending agency has not been put out in any way. Now, can that be replicated across the countries of the South? And at first at COP, the reaction was horror by some people in the industrialized world. But we had to say, but this already exists for Barbados. All we're asking for is that it be part of what all the countries in the South can legitimately ask for. Good news, there was some this morning when I spoke to the Prime Minister. She gave me a call to tell me how she was doing and so on, and then shared with me the fact that the outgoing president of COP, who is a major source of influence in the United Kingdom, and apparently, by extension, the United Kingdom itself, have bought into the idea that this is part of what climate justice could look like. So again, there's room for us in the South to advocate, and to advocate with intensity. And I think that is really what the future really has to be for all of us. There has to be a cross-fertilization of ideas. We have to let 1,000 thoughts contend, and out of that will come some solutions that work in the best interest and the common good of people in the South who have had to endure a struggle that has been unequal and disproportionate in many, many ways. But I also say that our fate is in our hands. And the more of us that we have working together on solutions, the better it is. That vaccine example I gave you earlier is a classic example of it. What you all were able to do in Africa in terms of vaccines at COVID to look after yourselves when the major producers in the world were not prepared to look after you. You made yourselves matter because you approached the manufacturing community en masse. And you can't say no to nearly 1 billion people very easily. It is very easy to say no to 1 million people. And in Barbados, it is even easier to have said no to 300,000 people. But once we were able then to go on that platform, scale matters, size matters. And I think that, to answer the question that was asked before yours, sir, that is one of the ways in which we can make this work, recognizing that there's tremendous strength and scale that we have between Africa and the Caribbean, and a commonality of culture and purpose and very similar histories.
Thank you very much. This has been really brilliant. I think the major takeaways we're getting here, collaboration and partnerships, that is inevitable. We also want to learn from each other, right? And we want to make sure that we advocate for the things that we want. And this has been a very brilliant session. On behalf of all the students, let me take this opportunity to thank you for taking this time to be here with us. We feel very, very honored for the opportunity. So thank you very much, and we can take our seats.